In 2007, a 28-year-old Japanese man locked himself inside of a restroom after the horrific murder of his English teacher. He proceeded to perform plastic surgery on himself to evade capture by the Japanese police, slicing his moles straight off of his face, giving himself a homemade nose job, and even reshaping his bottom lip with scissors. This is the terrifying tale of Tatsuya Ichihashi. Hello, my name is Tasha, and this is my series White Rabbit, where we deep dive into anything spooky, odd, or just interesting while I apply some special effects makeup. Today's look is going to be a botched plastic surgery look. Do not worry, our lips are going to stay on our faces. Maybe you have to watch.
Watch this, watch me.
All of the products that were used to make this video possible will be listed in the description below, so check those out. Before I get started, I wanted to thank everybody that watched my last video. Thus far, that's my highest watched video. And I asked you all to help me get to 200 subscribers, and as of now, 197. I don't know if you can see that. I really cannot thank everyone enough for watching, for interacting in the comments with me. It means so much to me.
Thank you, thank you, thank you.
And that is the easiest way to support me. Also, I love talking to you guys. I love getting your opinions and thoughts on the videos. If you have any suggestions, definitely leave those. Like I said, we are at 197, so if you have not subscribed and you like this type of content, please subscribe. You could be the one to get me to my goal. You could get me there. I would love for you to be a part of my YouTube family. I have literally been waiting for you my whole life.
I won't wait forever.
So with that being said, let's jump into some background about today's story. Tatsuya Ichihashi was born just east of Tokyo, Japan on January 5th, 1979. His parents were pretty well off. His mother was a dentist and his father was a doctor. This naturally put pressure on Tatsuya to really excel, but he never did. Originally, the plan was that he was going to be a doctor just like his father, but he did not excel in school. He got basically average, mediocre grades. And average, mediocre grades will not get you through med school. He did go to college after high school, but he ended up getting a degree in horticulture, and then he never got a job in his field after that. Tatsuya ended up living off of a allowance that his parents would give him of 100,000 yen a month, which roughly is about 700 to 750 US dollars. Well, it was in that time. So it wasn't some crazy amount, but yet his parents were still supporting him. When this case takes place, he's almost 30. He's still getting an allowance from his parents. He is not working. This seems like a failure to launch type issue. I don't even think he applied himself or was trying really hard to get a job in his field. Tatsuya was described as a loner, and apparently he had a slight obsession with violent manga. And by slight, I mean massive. He was also really obsessed with fitness. He bordered over exercising, in my humble opinion. Tatsuya worked out every single day, and he also cycled 15 miles at least every single day. Most people would consider the cycling 15 miles a day the workout, but Tatsuya would cycle 15 miles a day and then spend hours inside of the gym. He was like a dedicated gym bro with the personality of an incel. He did have a girlfriend, but I'm just saying, like, the personality type was incel-ish. They had matching energy. One day in March of 2007, Tatsuya would cross paths with 22-year-old English teacher Lindsay Hawker. Lindsay was spending a year in Chiba, Japan, teaching with this company called Nova. Nova at the time was Japan's largest employer of foreign nationals. It employed around 15,000 people at the company's peak, and about 5,000 of those were English teachers. Lindsay was originally from Coventry, England, and she had recently graduated from the University of Leeds. Before she pursued her master's in biology, she wanted to take a year off and teach English in Japan, so that is how she got connected with Nova. They set her up in an apartment with 2 other teachers, and Lindsay really loved her roommates. She loved her job. She was having the adventure of a lifetime before she met Tatsuya. Lindsay did live a little bit far from her job, which kind of surprised me because if you're going to provide housing, I would think that it would be close to the job. But anyway, every day that she had to work, Lindsay would ride her bike to the Chiba train station, and then she would take a train down to the school. Well, one day when Lindsay had gotten off of work, she was at the train station unlocking her bike, and Tatsuya approached her saying, "You are my English teacher." Lindsay told Tatsuya that he had to be mistaken because even though she was an English teacher, she knew all of her students and he did not look familiar. But Tatsuya was really insistent on the fact that she was his teacher. Lindsay got the ick from him, so she just hopped on her bike and rode off. I don't blame her. I looked up the average class size for Nova, and for adults it was 4 and for juniors it was 8. Lindsay did not work every single day. She wasn't slammed with classes. She's really getting a face-to-face with her students. And she had been working there for 5 months already. I'm pretty sure she would know her students by then. So yeah, ride off.
Get out of my face.
Unbelievably, that actually did nothing for her because Tatsuya started to follow her. And when she started riding full speed on her bike, Tatsuya started running full speed behind her, chasing her. And because he cycled 1,000,000 hours a week, he was actually able to keep up with her. Like, she could not shake him. Tatsuya kept pace with Lindsay riding her bike all the way back to her apartment. When Lindsay got to her apartment, she dropped her bike and she ran up to her door to unlock the door. But Tatsuya actually caught up with her at that time, and he just started to beg her to please teach him English. He gave her this whole sob story about how he really needed to learn English in order to get more job opportunities, and he was just begging her, pulling at the heartstrings. Tatsuya was just saying he wanted a better life. That's all he wanted. Lindsay initially told Tatsuya she did not have time to squeeze him into her schedule. I think she was just trying to shoo him away, but he would not leave. Tatsuya ended up asking Lindsay for a glass of water because he was really thirsty after stalking her all the way home. She didn't really want to let him in, but then she changed her mind because her 2 roommates were in the house and she wanted him to know that she did not live alone, just in case he thought about coming back. She also wanted her roommates to get a good look at his face in case they ever saw him again. After drinking his water, Tatsuya gave Lindsay one final offer, and he told her that if she would teach him English, he would pay her 33 USD an hour, the equivalent of, he was paying her in yen. This did pique Lindsay's interest because even though Tatsuya made her really uncomfortable, she did need the money. Lindsay did eventually agree to meet up with Tatsuya at a nearby cafe. And this was Tatsuya's idea. He said he wanted her to feel comfortable. They could be in a public setting. He did not mind. So Lindsay agreed. Before he left, Tatsuya passed Lindsay a sketch that he had made of her with his contact information on it. And they agreed to meet at that cafe 4 days later. Saturday, March 24th, 2007, Lindsay and Tatsuya met up at that small cafe in Chiba. There is security footage of them at the cafe and nothing seems too odd, but in my opinion, Lindsay looks very uncomfortable. When they were at the counter ordering, Lindsay was constantly doing that nervous play in your hair thing. Do y'all do that? Do y'all play in your hair when you get nervous? I don't really do that, but I think that is a nervous habit that some people have. At one point, Tatsuya even turned around just to say something to Lindsay, and she stepped back. You could tell that she was just uncomfortable around him. I just know she was trying to overcome all of that uncomfortableness and just get through the lesson, get her money, and get home. The lesson went pretty normally. It lasted about an hour, and then Lindsay started to bring the lesson to a close. I'm assuming that Lindsay was at least feeling a little more comfortable with him at this point because she did agree to take a cab with him back to his apartment. Apparently, Tatsuya had left his wallet at home. His apartment was very close to the cafe also, so he asked her if she would mind coming with him so he could go home and get the money for her. Now, Lindsay wanted her money, so she agreed, and the two of them left the small cafe by cab and went to Tatsuya's house. Now, when they got there, before she went up, Lindsay asked the taxi driver to wait for her. She said she was just running up, grabbing something, and she would be right back down. Well, he waited, and Lindsay never came back out. Assuming that she didn't need the ride anymore and she just forgot or chose not to come back down and tell him, he eventually took off and went back to work. Meanwhile, Lindsay's roommates noticed that no one has heard from her in a while, and they were starting to get really nervous. To make things worse, Lindsay never came home that night, which is definitely like her. She's in Japan. Where would she go? Who would she be with? Everything she knows is in that apartment or at that school. So the roommates head to the police department. They know something is wrong, especially since Lindsay was meeting up with that strange guy that chased her home a few days before. But the police could not have taken them less serious. They basically just shooed them away. They didn't do anything about this initial report about Lindsay. That following Monday, Nova, the school that Lindsay was working for, had called her parents to tell them that Lindsay had not shown up for work in 2 days, the 25th and the 26th, and that no one had heard from her. After that, they contacted the police themselves to file a missing persons report. The police did take it more seriously this time, and they talked to the roommates again about that strange man that Lindsay went to meet up with on Saturday. They also gave police that sketch that Tatsuya had made of Lindsay with his contact information on that, which was so dumb. If you had ill intent toward her, why would you write your information on a sketch and then just leave it for her? Because the police had this, it wasn't difficult to find where Tatsuya lived. When the police got to Tatsuya's apartment, they were knocking and no one was answering. It was dead silent in that apartment. They didn't have probable cause to actually go inside the apartment. So because no one was answering, there really wasn't much that they could do. What they did do is go over to one of Tatsuya's neighbors. One of Tatsuya's neighbors had a balcony that sat directly across from his, so you could see clear into Tatsuya's apartment from that balcony. So even though the lights are off and it's really dark, the police can clearly see a shadowy figure moving all through the apartment. At this point, they know he's home and they know he's avoiding them. Assuming this was going to be some kind of hostage situation and Tatsuya was just holding Lindsay against her will, the officers called for backup. The station dispatched 7 more officers to the scene, so there was 9 of them now, and they all began to talk about the approach that they were going to take. Like, how were they going to get inside this apartment? Before they could even decide on their strategy, Tatsuya's door flies open and out he comes running barefoot with a backpack. The officers try to apprehend him, but he ends up slipping away, and all they grabbed off of him was that backpack. Somehow he escaped them. He escaped 9 officers. The way I understand how this ended up happening is that there were some officers on the 4th floor, which is where Tatsuya's apartment was, and then there were some officers on the ground floor, and no one had a radio. So when Tatsuya runs out, the officers upstairs aren't even able to warn the officers downstairs that he's escaping because none of them had radios. Well, Tatsuya is gone, so they decide they're going to search his apartment. Now, it is dead silent in this apartment. They do not see Lindsay, they do not hear Lindsay, and they are getting a bad vibe because of the way Tatsuya just ran out of this apartment. They knew he was hiding something. And one of the first things they wanted to check out was this bathtub that Tatsuya had on his balcony. When the police were at the neighbor's house, they could clearly see a bathtub on the balcony. And of course, everyone thinks that's strange. Listen, I have tried to understand for the life of me how he managed to get a bathtub on the balcony. Was it not connected? I just don't understand how he moved it out there. I googled Japanese bathtubs. Those looked pretty normal. I googled Japanese apartment tubs. Those looked pretty unmovable. And then I even looked up portable tubs, but I don't think that that's what he had. I don't know, but somehow this man moved his bathtub to the balcony. There's something I'm missing though. Maybe you guys can fill me in and help me connect those dots. Anyway, they go to the balcony to check out this bathtub and they see that it is completely filled with a sand and soil mixture, and there are some freshly planted seeds. And underneath that, they find the naked body of Lindsay Hawker. The police believe that Tatsuya killed Lindsay sometime between Sunday night and Monday morning. The neighbors told police that they heard a dragging sound in the middle of the night, which they assumed was Tatsuya dragging that tub out to the balcony. The police instantly issue a warrant for Tatsuya's arrest, and his face is plastered everywhere in Japan. Every news station was covering this murder, and there were several images circulating of Tatsuya. They had even photoshopped some wigs on Tatsuya just in case he was trying to disguise himself as a woman. Life-size cutouts of Tatsuya were placed in stores and small shops all over Japan. However, they were not able to locate Tatsuya. A few months after Lindsay's murder, her family traveled to Japan and they caused a media storm. They pointed out several unsatisfactory moves that the Japanese police had made while handling her case, including ignoring Lindsay's roommates when they first raised the alarm. Also, allowing Tatsuya to escape 9 officers that were actively planning on barging in. And you know how I just said that they were circulating several images of Tatsuya all throughout Japan? Well, none of those images were recent. They were 7 years old. So they weren't even circulating a current image of the suspect, but they had time to Photoshop wigs? Even the questioning seemed somewhat botched because a lot of witnesses weren't spoken to for at least a month. Meanwhile, Tatsuya is in a full-blown panic. He is not taking this well. He traveled to Okinawa with several face masks and a baseball cap so that he wouldn't be recognized. He had spent some time living in this abandoned bunker where he essentially ate whatever he could catch. Tatsuya also did a really strange thing during this time of him evading the police. He was traveling all over Japan and he ended up traveling to some temples where he wandered through and basically wished Lindsay alive. He was trying to wish her back to life. That's a better way of putting it. Apparently, he had read some novel where a dead person was brought back to life by someone wandering the temple and thinking about them, wishing them back to life. Obviously, that didn't work, so Tatsuya had to stay hidden. He slept in internet cafes, which, side note, I didn't know what that was, but Japan has internet cafes where you can just like stay there for a night or two, get some sleep. Especially locals that miss the last train will check into a internet cafe just to have somewhere to sleep for the night. But back to the story. Tatsuya started working construction jobs in Osaka, and he did that for a year without being noticed. During this time, he decided that he really needed to make some changes to his appearance if he did not want to get caught. This is a big part of the reason why Tatsuya was working in construction. He was saving up for plastic surgery. But in the meantime, he was so nervous about getting caught that he thought he would make some minor adjustments on his own. Imagine thinking it's a good idea to do your own plastic surgery. So Tatsuya, inside of a public restroom, sliced 2 moles clean off his face because he felt like his moles were too identifying. He sewed a thread through his nose, which he pulled up and tightened, basically just to change the shape of his nose. And worst of all, y'all, he cut off a significant portion of his bottom lip with scissors so that it wouldn't be so full. He scissored off his lips in a public restroom. While he was healing, Tatsuya continued to wear 2 to 3 masks to cover his DIY plastic surgery, which wasn't that strange at all because apparently the pollen in Japan is crazy and most people do wear several masks. And I don't blame them because every year, Georgia pollen. I hate you! But even after going voluntarily lipless, Tatsuya was still so paranoid about being caught. And good, I'm glad he had a hard time. The police upped the reward to 10 million yen? 10 million yen And they were finally circulating more recent pictures of Tatsuya. Eventually, he finally saves up enough money for the plastic surgeries that he wanted. And getting this professional procedure would actually be his downfall. Tatsuya contacted a local surgeon about 2 different surgeries that he wanted to have done. He wanted the bridge of his nose reconstructed, which I'm sure is because that string tightening situation he did was probably botched. And he also wanted eyelid surgery. Brittany Vaughn covered this case and she said Tatsuya went from Japanese to Mexican, and I can't unsee it. The surgeon that ended up performing Tatsuya's surgeries noticed the really strange scarring from his DIY surgeries and got suspicious. He ended up sending several photographs to the police because he was sure that his patient was Tatsuya. After the police received these images, they were sure it was him too. So they released his after-surgery images alongside his pre-surgery images and circulated those. That is when a construction worker that worked alongside Tatsuya also called in to report him. By this point, Tatsuya had seen the new images circulating of him and he was shook. Tatsuya decided that it was time for him to go on the run again. He boarded a ferry in Osaka, and despite his best efforts, a crew member did recognize him. And they called to a security guard and told them, "You need to call the police." The officers boarded the ferry and they approached Tatsuya, and all they asked him is, "What is your name?" Tatsuya must have been tired because he was like, "It's me. It's me. I'm Tatsuya Ichihashi." It must be so mentally draining for 2.5 years to always be looking over your shoulder. He was ready to give up. Initially, Tatsuya was charged with abandoning a body because, remember, they never even got a chance to speak to him after they found Lindsay's body. Eventually, his charges were upgraded because Tatsuya told them everything. He told the police that from the very beginning, he was planning to assault Lindsay. When he told Lindsay that he would pay her back at the apartment, it was just a ruse to get her in there so that he could SA her, which he did, unfortunately. During that assault, Tatsuya said Lindsay was uncontrollably screaming. He could not get her to stop screaming. Which, like, duh, you're assaulting her. He became really afraid that his neighbors would hear and call the police, so he just started to strangle her. He says he didn't mean to kill her, but honestly, that annoys me so much. You say you didn't mean to kill her, but you were actively engaged in strangling her. What is the end result of strangulation? Death happens. You meant to kill her. Maybe he wasn't intending on killing Lindsay when he invited her over, but once your hands are around her throat, you know what you're doing. Not to mention, after he killed Lindsay, he shaved her head. He put her in that bathtub and he covered her with soil and seeds. Those are not remorseful actions. Tatsuya received life in prison with the possibility of parole after 10 years. And that sentence is as insane as he is. Tatsuya and his lawyer actually had the audacity to appeal this, stating that he was sentenced too harshly for just a mistake. At this point, him and the lawyer can go to hell. The courts basically said, "F out of here. You are not getting any less time. You can be paroled after 10 years. So Tatsuya decided to pass his time by writing his own novel that he called Before the Arrest. He apologizes to Lindsay's parents and family in the book, and he actually offered to give them all of the proceeds from the book, which the book did very well, especially in the UK, I believe. He sold like 100,000 copies. They were insulted and they refused the money. But this did not stop Tatsuya from turning that book deal into a movie deal. In 2013, I Am Ichihashi, The Journal of a Murderer, was released. I did not watch the movie. I did watch the trailer, which was in Japanese, but the trailer ended with that scene of him slicing off his lip. I will never be the same after learning about that scissor incident. It has been over 10 years, and fortunately, Tatsuya has been denied parole. I tried looking up when his next parole hearing was, but all I could find was the average amount of time served on a life sentence in Japan, and that was 32 years. Tatsuya was sentenced back in 2009. I am very interested to know what you think about this case. Not only the case, but the sentencing, and also the fact that he got a book deal and a movie deal while in prison. Please remember to subscribe if you like this type of content. I would love, love, love to see you down another rabbit hole.